Hey guys, this is Brennan. I have a quick tutorial for you on UV mapping. I was just in the process of UVing this train model that I made. I'm a student at the University of Utah and I'm working on a video game right now called Shiny. You can actually check it out on itch.io. So I'm making this train for it, and part of that is I need to UV map this train so that I can apply textures to it without those textures looking either squashed or warped or weird or anything like that. They need to conform around the model in a way that looks correct. So this tutorial will be beginner friendly, so don't worry if you don't know anything about UVs. I'm going to show you in this tutorial the simplest way I know how to do it, and also some secrets and tips that will save you a ton of time on the process of laying out these UVs. Okay, so to check how your UVs, or how a texture would look on a model, what you can do is, let's just say that you are in normal Maya. It should look like this. I'm in Maya 2022, and if you were to click on a part of your model, so let's say I'm clicking on this kind of cylinder part of the train, and then I can go in to Windows and UV, or workspaces, excuse me, and then UV editing right here. You can see this, and it will pull up this side window for you. And in this case, I've already UV'd the front of the train and this first cart right here. So when we look, we can see the UVs laid out all nicely in this box right here. And if I was to come up and click on this little checkerboard pattern at the top of the UV editor, then it will put this very basic default square texture on my model. So if we come in and look at it, you can see how everything is, like, the squares are pretty nicely shaped. They're not stretched, they're not warped or distorted. There's a little bit of distortion right here, you can see this. Maybe that's not the best, but for the most part they're laid out in a nice way. And now let's compare that to the part of the model that I haven't UV'd. If I was to click on this train cart, you can see, see how it's totally stretched and warped right here, like the zeros. If you see, this is the texture right here that it's putting onto it. These squares are super long stretched rectangles, and these zeros are gigantic. So this kind of looks hideous right now. So for this tutorial, I'm going to show you guys my process on laying out the UVs for this cart and for this cart, and also these little wheels and underside parts of the train. Now when you think about UV mapping, the way I want you to imagine the process is, imagine origami. Like, if you've ever seen like the origami cranes, imagine if you had an origami crane and you wanted to color it. There's some parts of it that are pretty hard to get to, right? Like if you're trying to get into the little crevices, it would be hard to paint it when it's folded. So imagine you take that paper crane and you unfold it again back to a normal flat piece of paper. Then you can color onto the piece of paper where you know the creases are, and then fold it back up, and your crane will look beautiful. So that's essentially what we're doing here with the UV mapping.
Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do to get started on UVing these two back carts is I'm going to hide the rest of my model so that they don't get in the way while I'm doing my UVs. So what I'm going to do is I'm in object mode, or if we go to object mode, by right clicking and dragging to object, you can select all of the stuff you want to hide, like this. Oops, I didn't get these wheels. And then just simply go up to display, hide selection. Perfect. So that's looking good. Now I'm going to hide this second cart so we can just focus on the middle one. Okay. So now that we got this guy, we're going to come in and look at him. We're going to focus on UVing the main body of it to start with. So I'm going to turn off this checkerboard pattern because that'll get in the way. And you'll see right away that there's two different, if we're in edge mode, if we right click and drag up to edge mode, there's two different colored lines we got here. We got the blue lines, they're the blue edges, and the white edges. So the white edges means that those edges are cut. Like that part of the model is cut out in its own UV shell. Like if we were to go to right click, UV shell. Oh, I guess you see how the white doesn't fully connect through this line. So the whole thing right now would just be one giant UV shell, which is a mess. But if it were all this, if all of the white edges were connected, it would have separate UV shells because it's cut. So at this point, I don't really like the default cuts that Maya's made to the model, so I'm just going to get rid of all of them. So what you can do is you just go to edge mode again. Oops, edge mode, and you select every edge on the whole thing like this. You can go over here to this UV. You need to be on UV Toolkit. If it's closed, just hit UV Toolkit right here, and these will probably be closed too. So I'll show you what it'll look like. It'll just look like this, okay? And then you can go and click on the create, cut and sew, and unfold tabs. These are really all you're going to need for UVing your model. Okay? So, to get rid of those default cuts that Maya put in, I'm just going to go over here with all the edges selected. I'm going to go over here to sew. See sew right here? Click that. And now, you'll see in your UV editor that this looks like this giant weird mess. But that's okay because we're going to do our own cuts. So now if I click off the model, you see there's no white edges because it's all sewed in together now. Alright, so if you want to cut an edge, you could just click on the edge like this. I double clicked so that it highlighted the whole edge, and then go over to cut right here, and it would cut it. And you could do the same thing with clicking and sewing. But there's actually oops, I Control Z that. There's actually a way that's a bit easier that I find. If you go up to the UV here at the very, very top, and you can go down to 3D Cut and Sew UV tool. So once you have that open, this will let you, just by clicking on edges, it'll automatically cut them. And also if you hold the control button and click on edges, it'll automatically sew them. So this just makes the process a lot faster. Okay, so for this kind of a model, I'm thinking since it's so square, the best thing that I could do to cut this out in a way that would make sense is just cut it out side by side. So I'm going to cut out this front side, or this, I guess this is a side, this left side, this front side, this right side, and then also the top and the bottom. And because these windows are going to probably need a different texture than the rest of the model, I'm going to individually cut out all of the windows as well. Okay, so let me go ahead and show you what I mean and how to do that. Let's cut out the entire bottom first, because if you look at the bottom, it's just one big chunk. Sorry, I probably should hide these other things. They're not so distracting. Just imagine they're not there. So if I was to double click, you see how it made this entire edge white? We've cut the entire edge, okay? And then we're going to double click right here, double click right here, and double click right here. And what that's just done is made that entire thing its own UV shell. So if I was to right click and go, oops, I'm going to click on just the pointer mouse, and then I go into right click UV shell mode, you'll see now that if I highlight red, the entire top is a UV shell, but now the bottom is an entirely separate UV shell. Now, in the editor, it doesn't look nice yet, but that's because we haven't unfolded it. It's still all squashed. But at this point, we don't need to unfold quite yet. We're going to go ahead and do all of our cuts, and then we can unfold, and if there's problems, we can fix them after that point. So, what I think I'm going to do next is I'm going to go back into edge mode. I'm going to click back on my cut and sew tool, and I am going to continue to start cutting things out. So because you can kind of see the clear seam through here, which separates the front and the sides and the top, this is where I want to cut along, okay? So I'm going to cut right there, double click, cut right here, and double click, cut right here. So we just made another shell, okay? Now let's cut out the back. Let's go here, cut along here, cut along here, and cut here. And then also right here. Okay, and right here. Great. So now let's take a look at what that looks like in the UV shell mode. Okay, good. We can see that this is its own shell. The red isn't spreading to any other areas except where it should. If I hover over it, same with this, same with the top, and the side, and the back. So that's looking very good. This is a pretty basic model, so it doesn't need very complex UVs. Okay, but now we're going to do the slightly more tricky part, which will be cutting out the windows. So, for the windows, if we look, oh, what the heck? I think I have a problem with my model. Hold on, let me fix my model real quick, and then we'll get back to this. Okay, guys, I apologize. I just had a small mistake in my modeling, but that's actually a good tip, actually, is while you're UVing, you might catch something that you messed up in your model, and you can fix things on your model midway through UV editing, and it's not going to hurt your UVs. It'll be fine. So, I'm just going to, once again, go back into Workspaces and open up the UV editor. And you see, even though I changed some stuff on my model, the UVs, or our shells, are still intact. So, I'm going to go back into the Cut and Sew tool. Now, what I'm going to try to do here is, sometimes the Cut and Sew tool is weird when there's just one edge and then a 90-degree corner. You see how even though I'm double-clicking it, it's not cutting it? Sometimes it's just a little weird like that. So let's just do the normal edge selecting and then going into cut. So I'm going to do all of these inside edges right here. And then we'll go over to cut. And then you can see it looks good. We'll do that for each window. I'm going to speed it up, and then once each window is done, then we'll talk about it. Okay guys, so now I've got every single window cut on both sides. At this point, we may need to do some more cuts on these windows, because when we flatten out our geometry, it's likely that these faces right here and here are not going to get flattened out properly. Unless we do, Unfold might do it, but we're going to have to see. Probably not, probably going to have to do some more cuts. So, before we worry about that though, let's go into our UV shell, and I will show you what to do next for the other side, or yeah, for the sides besides the ones with the windows. So let's go ahead and go back to the very bottom. I'm going to click on that shell, and now we're going to go over to the side panel again. So when I am unfolding my geometry, oh, by the way, when you're in the UV editor, it's navigating around it is pretty similar to just in perspective mode. You zoom in and out with your mouse wheel, and if you hold Alt and the mouse wheel down, you can pan. Okay. So, with the shell selected, we're going to look at our options here. So this is one of the most important parts. There's basically two tools that I use 90% of the time when flattening out UV shells. There's sometimes you'll want to use other tools, but pretty much 90% of the time you'll only need these two tools to cover it. And the two tools are normal based, right here, and unfold, which is right here. Those two will almost always get you the result you need. So in this case, I think I'm going to normal base this one. If it's just a very plain shape like this, normal base will work great. If it was something that was a little bit more rounded and curved, then I would want to unfold it. So, since it's very flat shape already, I'm just going to hit normal base right here. And look, that looks beautiful. If we take it up here to this other box, you can see that it perfectly matches how our model looks, right? So it's flattened very well. We can see all the geometry. There's no faces that are getting squashed or stretched, it looks like. So that's good. That's what we want. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same to the very top. Let's go ahead and normal base it. And we'll take a look compared to the other one. It looks about the right size compared to the bottom, which is good. So we're just going to drag it off to the side right here. So that one, it looks correct as well. Now let's go ahead and do the front and the back. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to normal base the front. And now before I resize it or anything, I'm just going to leave it there. And I'm going to normal base the back. And now what's going on here is the front and the back UVs are literally on top of each other. So if you just click and drag, you can highlight both of the UVs at the same time, which is nice because we know that they're the same size. They're pretty much exactly the same. So we can resize them at the same time. So you see how, even though it's normal based, these should be significantly smaller than how big the top and the bottom are. The top and the bottom are very big in our model compared to the front and the back. So let's go ahead and hit the R key to scale. And I'm going to scale down the UV. And you notice that when I scale a UV, it's not affecting the actual model face at all, which is very nice. So I don't have to worry about messing up my model at all when I'm resizing things in the UV editor. So we'll go ahead and, I think they need to be about this big, because their width should be about equal to the width of the top. So I'm going to go ahead and move them over here. Move them close, but not overlapping with the top, or in the bottom. And then I'm just going to click away, and they're overlapped. So I'm just going to click once, and then if I hit the move, hit W to move, then you drag up, and voila. You've got them both resized the same size and laid out. So, at this point we're looking very good. We've got the top, bottom, and the front and the back. We just have to worry about the sides now. So let's go ahead and see what would happen if we did try to either normal base or unfold the sides. We want to see if these little faces get lost that are next to the window. Because if that's the case, we're going to have to do some more cuts. Okay? So we're going to go here, and we're going to go to normal base. Oh, it doesn't like to do that. 1 second. Okay. So we normal based it. And we're going to look. And yep, you see how... Let's go to face mode. These faces, right here, they're not really getting any room to get textures on them. They're just kind of flattened. So that's going to be a problem. Let's go back to, oops, UV shell. Let's see what unfold would do though, if we clicked unfold. Okay, that's interesting. So, this looks a little funky, right? If we compare it to the front, or to the side of the train. But what I do want you to notice is, look, it actually did help me with what I was trying to fix. The sides along, these faces on the outside of the windows are now showing, so they now would get texture on them, which is good. But the overall shape does not look like our train. So that seems bad, but we might be able to fix that actually. Okay, so let me just go ahead and do the other side the exact same way. So I'm going to go the other side. If we normal based it, it would look like this, but in this case, we're probably going to unfold it. And then I'm going to move these to be exactly on top of each other, and you're seeing how it's kind of rotated wonky, so let's get them on the same rotation, kind of. And remember, rotating it or scaling it or anything in the UV editor is not messing up your model, so don't worry. Okay, that's not perfect, but it's close. So, at the moment, it kind of looks like our entire side got squashed like an accordion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight both of our shells here, and then I'm going to go to scale, and now I'm going to scale them sideways to make it look more like our model again. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and scale it. Now you have to kind of decide if this is too wonky or if you think it will work. Kind of depends on your own preference. But for my needs, I think this is actually fine. So, since we've got that where we want it, now we're going to have to kind of scale it compared to the rest of our shells. So it probably, since the top to the bottom of this is the full length of this square. I'm probably just going to overall shrink this down till it meets both the sides of the square, like that. Okay. So once we're finished laying out every single UV shell, we're going to want to pack them all into one single square, but for now it doesn't matter. We'll worry about that at the end. We're just going to lay them out. And now we have everything done except for the windows on this. So let's go ahead and just do a quick test to see how it's looking compared to the start. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up to the checkerboard pattern, and then I hit it. And now, ignoring the windows, we're going to ignore the windows because we know those aren't laid out yet. But let's look at everything else. That's looking pretty good. You'll notice that we maybe have a little bit of warping right on the very edge of this. But you see how everything is nice squares? It's not stretched. The bottom, ooh, look at the bottom, looks so much better. Okay, and I'll show you another thing that's super helpful as well. If you go up to the top left, you'll see these little things that look like little Tetris 3 cubes. There's this one right here that's like half and half colored, and if you click on it, you'll get this kind of a view. And what this shows you is where your model is being squashed and stretched and where it's not. So white is good. White means that it has almost no squash or stretch. And then red means it's got stretch, and blue means it has squash. So at the moment, because we haven't laid out the windows yet, we can see that they're red because they have a lot of stretch. They're stretching really far right now. But that's okay because we're going to fix that. But as for the rest of the car, it looks really nice, right? There's a lot of white. And it doesn't matter if there's you see right here, there's a tiny bit of red, there's just a tiny bit of blue in areas. If there's just a tiny bit, that's totally fine. What you want to avoid is the very bright red and bright blue like these, okay? So we're going to go ahead and turn that off, and we're going to go ahead and turn off the checkerboard. But yeah, I'm actually pretty happy with the unfolded sides. So but say that I wasn't happy with that, what I would have done was just gone in here, oops, to edge mode with this, and I would have, oh yeah, this is annoying. I would have cut out all of these edges right here. These ones right here, I would have gone cut. But because it worked fairly well with just unfold, I'm not going to worry about that. Alright, so next thing is to do all the windows. And the windows are going to be dead easy basically, because they're all flat. We're just going to normal base them. So let's go back to UV shell. I'll click on a window, I'll click on normal base, and it will be way too big, but that's okay because we're going to normal base every single one of these windows before we resize them, okay? So, do fast forward real quick. Alright, we have every window normal based. So now, what we can go ahead and do is just click and drag over all these window shells. And I will take them over here. Now, obviously these are way too big, because if we look at the window holes on our other model, they should only be like this big, right? So I'm going to size them way down till they're kind of the same size as the window holes. Okay, so now that they're sized more correctly, again, we're just going to click on it one by one to start laying them out. Okay, so now every single one of the windows are laid out, and we're just about done with this part, because we look at it, we got every single shell done. There's no shells that are missing anymore, they're all laid out. So now what we want to do is fit them into a nice square, and there is an option to do automatic layout of UVs. I usually don't like that option because it will kind of mess up your sizes sometimes, but let's go ahead and try it just so you can see an example. If we highlighted every shell, and then we go over here to, it's down here at arrange and layout. You have to open up this tab, and then you could go to layout, and it will put them in a square for you. Hey, that actually is not half bad. I was expecting it to do a much worse job. Why is my pivot up here? I think I can fix the pivot if you click on this thing. Or no. Click on this hammer. Oh yeah, hammer, edit pivot. Put the pivot back. Close. There you go. I don't know why mine is so weird. Okay. So now let's shrink them down. Now, if I didn't like how the automatic layout had laid them out, then I would just do it all myself and kind of Tetris them into a box. And you want to kind of make them as big as they can fit into the box. You don't want to have a bunch of empty space because that will help your texture to work better with them. So I am going to adjust it a little bit because there's a little bit of overlapping. So we'll cut to when I'm finished with separating them out a tiny bit. Okay, there we have it. Now it is essentially perfect. Or as perfect as I need it to be for this game. We click on the squash and stretch. We can see there's still a tiny bit of stretch in the windows, but not nearly as bad as it was. And they're still fairly white, so they'll be fine. Okay, guys, so now we're just real quick going to do the wheels and these connector things that are connecting the wheels. So let's go ahead and hide the train car now. So, one of the tricks that's going to save you a ton of time if you're doing a model like this is, for these, every single wheel is exactly the same model. I just duplicated it. And all of these connectors are the same model. So, to save yourself a ton of time, you can just UV one wheel and one connector, and then reduplicate them or remirror them, depending on what you're doing with your model. It will actually keep the same UVs you've created across every model that you, or every new object of it that you duplicate or mirror. Okay guys, so I went ahead and I hid some more of the stuff so that we can just focus on a single wheel. And let's look at the UVs that that Maya already did default. Let's see what it would look like if we put the checkerboard on. Okay, so we look and you see that the sides here are fine basically, but right here it's completely stretched. It looks terrible. So let's just redo it ourselves. So remember again, first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to edge mode. We're going to select every edge and sew every edge. Okay. Then we're going to go into our UV cut and sew tool, and I'm going to click all around to separate the front face and all around to separate the back face. And now this is a new challenge because this is kind of a cylinder shape, right? Which can seem tricky to know how to properly UV map it. But what we're going to want to do for this kind of a shape is use the unfold tool right here. And in order to do that, it has to have at least one cut so that we can flatten it out. So that cut or that seam that we're going to put in, we kind of want to hide it because the textures that meet on the edges of the seam is the one place where our textures are not going to line up very well. It's not going to look the best. So I'm going to go ahead and put that seam where no one will see it on the very bottom of the wheel. Like obviously if the wheel was turning in the game, then you'd probably be able to see it. But at least for the default position, we're going to put it at the very bottom of this wheel. Then what you can do is just go into our UV shells. And that's literally the only cuts we need to make at all. We got the front, the back, and the sides of the wheel with the one cut down the very bottom of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to normal base the front and the back. Let's go ahead and normal base them. Okay. And now we'll move them out of the way. And then we'll click on this shell and we will go to unfold. Okay, you see how this might be alarming at first because it doesn't look like our model, right? It doesn't look like rounded like our model does. But in this case, we don't want it to. We want it to be laid out very flat so that the textures can go on without any warping. Okay, so I'm going to try to straighten it out. And then if you look, these are pretty vertical on our UV shell, but in the model, they're much more closer to a square, the rectangle shape. So I think what that means is I need to stretch this UV shell a bit until it kind of matches that aspect, at least, of the model. Okay, so now we're almost done with the wheel. We're just gonna, let's go ahead and just do a little test. We'll put these all together in a single square, see what it looks like. Okay, so now you see it's looking really good. The only bad thing is that these squares are quite a bit bigger than the ones on the sides, right? So let's try to resize this shell so that the square size matches more. I'm going to make it bigger, which will make the squares smaller until we kind of get a similar size. Okay, that looks good. And now we'll just shrink them all down to fit inside the single square. And now we look at it. It looks beautiful. Okay. And then if we go to this, we can see that there is basically no squash or stretch. Great. Okay guys, for the sake of time, I don't think I'm going to show the UVing of these connectors, but they're very basic. All I would do is kind of cut out the fronts and the sides, kind of like the train car. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go to display, show all, and then we'll get the entire train back. Okay. And now we have this single wheel that's UV'd properly, but none of these other wheels are. These are all still the messed up wheels. So let's go ahead and duplicate so we don't have to do the UVs for every single one of these wheels. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to object mode and click on the wheel that has the good UVs, and then I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate, and then if you use the move tool, you can see that we have the duplicated one that now has good UVs, and we're just going to put it exactly over the old wheel. Okay. So I'm going to go into side view to line it up perfectly. Oops. Okay, when you get it into the perfect position here, what I'm actually going to do to be able to delete the old wheel is, let me switch back into classic Maya mode, or workspace. Okay. I'm going to pull out this wheel. This is the good one with the good UVs. I'm going to delete the one with the bad UVs. Delete. And now, to get it in the exact position that it should be in, we're going to click on this one. And we're going to look at, in channel box right here at the top right, if we look at translate X, see how it's 2.68 on translate X? We're going to click on this one, and when we move it side to side, you see it changes what translate X is. So we're going to make it match the position of the other one. So I'm just going to do 2.68. And ta-da! It's there. And we have two wheels with the good UVs. And then from there you could duplicate both these wheels at the same time, drag them over to this side, put them exactly over these wheels, and then what you would do is just the exact same thing. You delete these old wheels, and then you would change the translate X to negative 2.68 so that it would line up perfectly on this side. There's one more thing that I'm going to show you that will help you for when you actually go to apply textures, okay? So, going back to this guy, okay, so on this guy, remember we were going to want to have a different texture for the wall of the train car than for the windows, right? So what you can actually do is give them a different material in Maya, and then when you export your entire model as an OBJ and get it into Unreal Engine or Unity or whatever you're using, you'll be able to apply different textures to different parts of your model. So, let's select this entire shell, and then if you right click, you'll see you can go down to assign new material. So let's click assign new material, and then let's just go to Lambert, because Lambert's a very standard default material. So, okay, it didn't pop up. I'm going to do it one more time. Assign new material, Lambert. Okay, so now you see we've got a new Lambert material. I'm going to go ahead and call this, let's just say, outside cart. Okay? And then I'm going to hit enter. So now, we have the outside cart material on the side of this train. And then if we wanted to do a different material for the windows, we would click on every single one of them. then we would go to assign new material. If you wanted a more glossy, like shiny material, you could do Fong. And then rename it to Windows. Hit enter. Oh yeah, you see how they're a little more shiny now? Okay, well that's going to do it for this tutorial, guys. Thanks so much for watching to the end of the video. If you give it a like and subscribe, you'll be able to see more tutorials that I put out. If there's anything that I missed or any questions that you have, go ahead and leave them in the comments. Thanks so much again, guys, and I'll see you later. Bye.